Feldspar. There's a good reason that these two are my favourite gemstones in the whole world. I've got a beautiful round cabochon of very flashy labradorite to play with today, and I've made a demonstration piece for the Halo of Beads Feldspar pendant in this beautiful moonstone. Hi, this is the Gemhawks YouTube channel, and today we're going to work with Feldspar. Some of my favourite gemstones exist in this beautiful family of very beautiful optical gemstones. So I've got a massive chunk of labradorite to demonstrate with today, and I've already made a pendant for today's design in the Halo of Beads design, utilising a gorgeous big old moonstone. So we are going to crack on. Just to tell you a little bit about what we're using today, I've got some 4mm round copper beads, 1mm or 18 gauge wire. I've got 1.25mm or 16 gauge wire, and some 0.4mm or 26 gauge wire. Let's head back down to the board, take a closer look at this little beauty, and then I'll show you how you can craft one of these with me. Got to be careful or I might get lost in these gemstones. So just for reference, the round moonstone cabochon is 37mm across. It's quite a chunky monkey though. And the labradorite cabochon, look at that, it's translucent in places, it's amazing. That one is 44mm. They're really, really beautiful cabs, so I hope that you think I've done justice to them. So my first piece of wire is an 18-inch length of 1mm gauge wire. This is equivalent to 18 gauge, and again that's 18 inches in length. Now in terms of tools, it's the usual set of pliers and cutters, but today I'm also going to be using my flat facing pliers that have got a really good sturdy square box joint. Now you don't have to use the flat pliers, but these have got a really strong box joint, and the reason I'm referencing this is that's what I'm going to utilise to create the strong and slightly longer prongs. If your cab is really skinny and thin, then you can just use the pliers, or you can use any tapered pliers, but just pop a mark on them so you can make repeatable prongs. First thing I'm going to do is to warm that central section, and I'm just going to create the first of my prongs. So this is a hybrid setting, and I'm using the box joint, not the pliers part of the pliers. So I'm going to generate a really good strong angle change to begin with. I'm going to pop that box joint in and push the wire back in the other direction. So you get this kind of zig-zag thing going on. So quite a long piece of wire I'm working with. So just grip across and bring that back down so that you generate the first part of your prong. Give it a bit of a squish to keep it nice and flat initially, and then I'm going to pinch the tip of that prong because I don't need the prongs to be open in any way. If I just flip this over in the opposite direction, you've got two ways that you can make a prong, and I'll show you the first one right now, which is to grip across like so and push that prong around. In that way you get an elevated piece of wire coming away from that flat line. The next thing I'm going to do is to add on some beads. So we're going for a combination of beads and prong setting. I've done beaded bails before, I've done a plentiful amount of prong set designs, and if you want to check out some of the other tutorials I have for prong setting, you can have a look at the link just here. I will also link it into the end of the video, so you can head back and have a look at those if you wish to. Now I'm going to use 3 beads in between each prong, and these are pure copper beads, and they are 4mm size. They've got a really good aperture down the middle, which means that they fit onto my 1mm or 18 gauge wire really easily. In order that when I bend this wire around later, I don't put too much pressure on the beads, I'm going to allow a small gap between the last bead and where I put the next angle change in. So you can use your favourite pliers to make that angle change if you want, but then I'm going to very cautiously use the box joint of the same set of pliers over and over again to generate those prongs. So let's just pop that into position, utilising the box joint to make that distance. It would be just as easy to use any tapered flat facing pliers, use a marker pen to create a line on those pliers tines or sides, and then you can sort of check back and utilize that to generate the size of each prong. So I'm going to grip near to the top but not completely at the top of that pass of wire, bring that all the way down, and again squish into position. Now you need to be giving a little bit of control to your squishing there. If you squish too hard, the wire will flip upwards and you won't end up with this lovely flat design. It's very easy to fix, you just bring it back down again, but just a heads up. So the other way that you can generate the prong is to grip across that prong like so and pull the wire straight. So you've got two different ways in which you can build up this little selection of upright prongs onto the beaded wire. So I'm going to continue doing this, keeping the central section at the bottom. So this is ever so slightly off to the left. So I'm just going to add a bunch on towards the right to begin with, aiming to keep the same amount of wire on either end. By the time I end up with about a centimetre or 10 millimeters or just under ½ an inch in between the two crossover points. So add on whichever number of beads you want between each prong. I think 3 is a nice aesthetic when it's these 4mm beads, and then I'll meet you back in a second when I've built up that section of beaded prongs. I've taken some scrap paper and made a little piece that measures around the edge of my cabochon. And I'm just going to lay that down to make sure that I have enough prongs and beaded segments. So there's probably a little over the 10mm I was looking for. It's about 12mm, but that's absolutely fine because we're going to create a 3-wire bail up at the top of this halo of beads Feldspar pendant. So the next thing that we're going to do is to start warming through the wire that's inside the beads, just paying particular attention to wherever we've caused those bends to create the prongs. We're going to need this to move smoothly in a circular form around the edge of that cabochon, and rather than pressing it against the cabochon, I'm just going to very softly start to draw this around. Now as I do so, the prongs are not sitting dead upright towards me, they're slightly tilting inwards, and that's very purposeful because it will help us to generate those prongs in a few moments. Now I'm not going to complete the full circle to begin with, I just want to get an idea of where everything's going to start coming together. So I need to make sure that I'm getting the correct kind of size down here at the base of the pendant. So particularly in the middle of the prong section of this wire, I'm just going to make it start forming around that cabochon size. And it needs to be relatively snug fitting, not too much of a gap. I'm not going to draw the top wires over at all. I'm just going to get that to start sitting around in a bit of a horseshoe shape. I've taken a couple of moments just to bring that around, and again those prongs are starting to sit inwards rather than straight upright from the board, and I've just drawn the ends over so I can get a good idea of whether or not this fits. Now there's an awkward distance between those last two prongs. There's not enough distance to add another set of 3 beads and another prong, or the two wires will end up far too close together for me to generate a bail. So what I'm going to do is to leave it as is for the moment, and I may add a single bead on either side before I turn both of those wires upwards to generate that bail. As for right now, we're going to start bringing those prongs into position. I want to give you an idea of the side profile of this enormous labradorite. It's very, very square. The doming on the moonstone was just a little more smooth and even. This is a very chunky one. So just bear that in mind when you're generating the prongs. For this one, a right angle prong, something like that kind of shape, will work really well. Whereas if you have a more smoothly chamfered dome on your cabochon, you'll need to do a slightly different variation of this technique. So I'm going to use 2 pairs of pliers to generate the prong itself, and you may be better with a tapering set of chain nose pliers, and I'll just grab a prong just here, and what I need to do is to very firmly support either side where those bends have been created, like so. So I'm going to grip that very firmly, and then I'm going to use another set of chain nose pliers, in this instance my bent tip chain nose pliers, just to draw the top over. Now I'm going to do that very softly to begin with, and then just try the cabochon in and see how it fits. You'll need to form fit your prongs on your design to work with your chosen cabochon. So that's actually going to work really well with this steep sided cab. If you have a more gently chamfered edge, then you'll need to put a slightly softer curve in. I'm going to do a bunch more of these. I'll do one more with you, and then I'll prepare the rest of these prongs in exactly the same way, and I'll meet you back. But one more with you right now. So I'm making sure that I'm gripping very firmly both sides where that angle change occurs, and I'll bring that tip over firmly. So you can see that side lifted ever so slightly. I wasn't holding it firmly enough, so I'm just going to bring that tightly back together and make sure that this matches the first of those prongs I've created. So just keep going all the way around, making sure that your cab is going to sit inside this little harness securely. So cabochons do vary greatly in how they're cut. You can get ones which have got the most perfect dome over the top. You can get very skinny ones, or like the giant lab I've got now, you can get very, very chunky ones. So that's what I'm working with today. So just bear in mind that your prongs need to be form fitted to your cabochon. Often when I'm wrapping cabochons with you, I suggest leaving a gap or some airspace between the cab and the frame. Today, I don't want any gaps at all. I want this to fit right around the outside of that cabochon as tightly as possible. Once you've snuggled everything into position, you're going to assess whether or not you think you need some beads up at the top. Now, I think if I add a bead in this gap either side of the last prong, it's going to become too close together for the uprights to form a very secure bail. So I'm not going to add another bead in, but if you have extra space, you absolutely have the option to add a few of those beads in just to fill the space should you need to. So for me, what I'm going to do, I'm going to grip up at the top on either end of those bail wires and just push them upright. I'll just pop the cabochon back in, get everything really, really tight, and make sure that I'm not going to leave too little or too much space. So I'm going to need to bring the bend I've made in ever so slightly. It needs to be really, really tight. We definitely couldn't have got another bead in there. So just take your time to make the decisions. If you warm the wire first, you have the opportunity to fix any decisions you make. So I'm just going to push the wire up and away. Now it's at a janky angle at the moment, but I'm not going to worry about it right now. That's going to be when we start creating the 3-wire beaded bail up at the top in a moment. We'll be able to fix that. So that by itself is a really attractive halo of beads design for this beautiful and massive feldspar, beautiful flashy labradorite. Before we commit anything further, we're going to assess each and every one of those prongs and make sure that they do fit the cabochon perfectly. We don't want any sticky uppy bits. So there's one here that's a little high and there's one here that's a little high. So it's just a case of taking that out, dropping the prong down ever so slightly, popping your cab back in and ensuring that that fits snugly against the gemstone. So I'm going to do that a couple more times, make sure that I'm happy with how that all sits, and then we'll move on to creating a back for this lovely halo of beads design. We're now going to use a spiral back for this pendant design. You can utilise this anytime you're creating with a cabochon for a pendant. I have now a 12 to 14 inch length of 1.25mm, equivalent to 16 gauge wire. I'm continuing to work in raw copper because I just love how it works and how it ages gently with time. Let's start by conditioning that wire. So I'm going to run that a couple of times between thumb and forefinger to get some fluidity. I'm going to start by creating a spiral. I'll be using my memory wire finishing pliers. You can utilise bail makers or your round pliers. I'm going to start by creating best part of a circular form. And then I'm just going to start pushing that end, the cut end, towards the arc of the remainder of that spiral. So just push that in and then start circling around loosely. Now you don't need a huge amount of wire on the back of the cabochon because most of the action takes place around the outer edges of this spiral back design. So I'm going to begin by creating an increasingly open spiral shape, and I'm just utilising the wire's natural tendency towards arcing. So if it gets a little bit out of shape, you can of course modify that, but we're just looking to generate a relatively quickly opening spiral where the outside then fits just inside the rear of the cabochon. You can of course utilise this design on the front of a cab as well. It's entirely up to you how you utilise each part of this design. What we do want to have is plenty of wire left towards the end of this stretch. So I'm just going to slightly open this out and start offering it to the back of the design. Now do take a lot more time than I have to make sure that you're happy with the smoothness of the lines and to make sure that they do match up to your cabochon. So let's just take a look. That actually looks pretty decent, although I will be needing to open up this top part here. And I will want those two lines to just cross side by side up at the top here. So where they cross over, I will need to bring the tail of wire away at a right angle, and that's going to become the central wire in that 3-wire bail. And the reason we need to be using a strong 1.25 16 gauge wire is because at a point it becomes a single wire bail down the back. So you do need to make sure that you're utilising that heavier wire. So just get that angle good, and then we're going to offer that on the back one more time. And at this stage I would very much recommend just hammering this design once you're happy with how it looks. So I'm going to take a second just to play with that, and then I will gently hammer it on a steel block with my chasing hammer to make sure that that fits exactly and to make sure that it is indeed good and strong. We now have 3 pieces of a puzzle. So we've got the front, we've got the rear side, and we have our cabochon. And to bring this all together, I'm going to use some 0.4mm or 26 gauge wire. I have approximately 18 inches of that wire just here. If you're using a large cabochon, you may want to add a little bit to that number. The first thing we're going to want to do is to secure our lovely spiral rear for the cabochon together. So the simplest way we can do this, and really the only way you need to do this, because I've hammered that quite firmly, it's got a lot of residual strength. It's not going to have any problem keeping the rear side of that cabochon under control. As long as it sits inside the edges of that cabochon, there's no escape. So I'm just going to add 3 or 4 wraps around the inner part of that spiral. So let's just find a place that's easy to see, and I'm going to wrap around a section of that spiral. You may need to grab in a set of pliers just to help you. 3 or 4 wraps is usually plenty with a 0.4mm or 26 gauge wire to get a really good grip on that wire, especially when we've hammered it flat, because it's changed that profile from round to almost flattened oval. It's not quite ribbon wire yet, but I got it almost there. So just take that tail and get it to sit down firmly on the underside of this section. So let's just give that a little bit of a tweak to make sure that it's good and solid. And then I'm going to slide that along. I might actually add another rotation of wire around just to make sure that it's a good solid connection point. You can go for as many or as few as you want. When you're handling finer wire, try not to handle it too much, especially if it's warm, as it finally is here today. So there are, I think, probably about 6 rotations of wire now, which is a really good connection point, a really good place to start. And I'm going to draw that all the way up to just next to where the 2 ends of wire cross over. Let's make sure that that still sits inside the form of the cabochon, and then I'm going to wrap 3 times around the other end of that wire spiral. So that's 1, 2 and 3. What I might do, just for giggles, is just fill that with 6 wraps, because then it will match the start point. So this is going to be the outside, and then the piece where the finer gauge wire actually truncates needs to go against the cab. It's very important that you do sit that very smoothly against the wire, and then add your cab into position, correct side up, and then we're going to drop on our third part of the puzzle, which is the front section. Now, for a small period of time, this is going to be a bit leery and a bit annoying. just get past that. It'll be absolutely fine in the end. So if we flip this over, all we need to do now is to zigzag between the outer frame, which is the beaded wire segment that's got those prongs on it. So I'm going to rotate once around the outer frame, and then I'm going to push the wire underneath the back, that spiral back section. So I'm going to zigzag from point to point on this design. Now what will happen is that everything's going to wiggle around, it might fall apart, the cabochon might escape. Don't worry, because it's all going to be worth it in the end. Just hold that like so, and I'm then going to bring the long piece of wire back around. So I've travelled underneath the spiral that forms the back. So what I'm going to do is go over the top of that back and inside, in between the beaded prong section, so that the wire travels all the way around. It's a little bit of a kink there, but I think we've won. So that's absolutely fine. I'm then going to bring it back again in exactly the same fashion underneath that rear spiral design. You can use pliers if you prefer, but that just makes it a bit more tricky for you to see what's happening. So all I'm doing is a point-to-point wrap here, and I'm just bringing together the three parts of the puzzle. Well, technically I'm sewing together the two pieces that are made of wire, and in doing so the cabochon will end up in a secure housing. So you can repeat the same protocol. I've brought the fine wire underneath the spiral, so over the top of the spiral, and then in between the cab and the outer frame, which is where the beads and the prongs sit. Slower is better because you'll get less kinks. And then back again, I'm going to push the leading edge underneath that spiral, draw it all the way through, and I'm going to continue moving all the way around in exactly the same way. Now by the time I get to the far end, everything's going to be coming together. You do need to ensure that your beads are sitting on the outside of your cabochon. You do need to make sure that your prongs are sitting on the face of the cab. How beautiful is this labradorite? I can actually see the prong through that. It's so translucent. So I'm going to do one more with you, bringing the wire underneath the spiral, over the top of the spiral, and then down in between the cabochon and the frame. Just knocked all of my beads everywhere. That's classic gem. And then repeat all the way around. So I'm going to continue, and I'll join you back in a couple of moments after I've picked up all of my beads. As with all designs, no matter if they're wire, macrame or macrame if you prefer, or anything else that you're working with, it pays to take your time. So if you're learning something new today, then just take a breath, take a beat, and have a bit of a practice, and then crack on when you're ready and calm. It can take a while to get everything to sit just exactly how you want it to, but when it does come together, it's a real pleasurable moment. I've woven all the way around from the beginning point to the end point, and the central wire, that slightly heavier wire, is just slightly off to one side. Now I could fix that without showing you, but the idea is I'm here to kind of help you understand how this comes together. So let's just open those two wires out, and you can take a few moments to just settle that in the centre. So it doesn't really matter if there's a bit of a gap, we're going to bring everything together shortly anyway. So let's have a look at how that's all sitting together. At this point, your cab wrap should pass the shake test. And what that is over a nice soft surface, give everything a bit of a wiggle. If it doesn't come out the back, and if it doesn't come out the front, then you know that your design is going to pass that shake test. So you can see that the wires I've added on the back sit in between some of the beads. I haven't even put them in between every single bead. You absolutely could do that if you wanted a sense of absolute symmetry, but do you know what? Today I felt like going a little bit more free flow. Now one of my prongs, it's ever so slightly on the wonk, so you can very softly adjust those, being mindful of the surface of your gem. If you need to, you can slide a piece of paper underneath, and if any of them are still sitting up a little bit, you can take a second to get them to sit back down. You could use a bezel rocker if you have one. So right now we're looking at the front of the design, and what we're going to do is to bring those three wires together with a 3-wire bail wrap. So let's head to the rear of the design and see where our wire's sitting. So it's sitting over on one side, so I'm just going to spin around that outer frame for a second, just to travel a little way towards the centre point. Once I've got that a little bit closer to the middle, what I'm going to do is to wrap 3 times around that middle wire, And I'm going to do this on the rear to begin with. That's 1, that's 2, that's 3 wraps. And I'm just going to leave that wire coming off on the underside. So if I flip over to the front, the design that I'm going to show you today is a 3-wire bail. And you may need to just reshape those bail wires if they're not sitting perfectly for you. Let's get them all upright. So I've got 3 wraps around that central heavier wire. So what I'm going to do is my chosen weave, which is going to be from the underside, a single wrap around both the middle wire and, as it's shown on screen, the upper wire, all the way around just one time. And then I'm going to wrap 3 times around that middle wire again, the heavy one. So that's 1, that's 2, and that's 3. Once I've got those 3 wraps, I'm going to push them down so that they sit firmly against that single pass. And then from the underside, I'm going to bring the wire up in between the upper and middle wires. And then I'm going to draw the middle and lower wires together with a single wrap, bringing the tail of wire up so that I can wrap 3 times around the middle wire. This is just a classical 3-wire weave that we're doing today. Let's just splay those out ever so slightly so you can see slightly better. And we're just alternating between which side we add the additional wrap. So 3 wraps around the middle wire, and now 1 wrap around the upper and middle wire. And then 3 wraps around that middle wire again. 1, 2, and 3. Push those wires into position, and then a wrap around the middle and lower wires. So you're just alternating from one side to another, and it's a lovely way to bring 3 wires together, utilising slightly less weaving than you might do if you went for one of those fine wire hungry weaves that can take forever and ever. So it's up to you how long you continue with this design. You could, if you wanted to, because we've got quite a lot of wire still available to us, you could simply make that into your bail, and you could use that design all the way around and then just bring those 2 ends inside the frame and the one end all the way around and pop it on the front as a spiral. Very, very simplistic way to finish off a bail. However, I'm going to open these out a little bit. Maybe we'll do one more sequence. So around the middle and upper wire, we'll do 3 wraps then around the middle wire. 1, 2, and 3. Scoot those down every time you've completed a sequence, and then we'll do 1 wrap around the middle and lower wire, finishing off with 3 wraps around that heavier weight middle wire. And again, if you wanted to, you could simply continue with that protocol to generate a really lovely woven bail, but we're going to add some beads and do something a little bit different today. So I'm going to bring that wire all the way across the back, trim off. Pieces of wire like this are not scrap. They're really useful for such things as just tying things together. If you're adding an S spiral on the back of a design, you can use short pieces of wire like this as well. So it always pays to keep hold of them. What we are going to do is to make sure that that cut end sits firmly down, as close to that central wire as possible. If you've got really fine tipped pliers, you can get right in there. So I'm just going to give that a really firm squish and a squeeze once I'm happy with how it's looking. And then I'm going to add on a few more of these beads. So let's do one at a time. Let's just bring that first one in and slide it down to the middle. So what we're going to do here is a variation of my eyelid design, which I generated, gosh, about 2014, 2013, something like that. And what we're going to do is to wrap the 2 wires on either side around the bead. So I think I'm going to start over with the upper wire just here, and I'm going to bring it around the outside of that bead. I'm then going to take the opposite wire and take that one underneath, like so. So they're just crossing over. 1 wire goes to the left and over the top, 1 wire goes to the right and underneath. Let's add another bead in. It's a really simple way to just highlight those beautiful beads and to utilise the stronger wire as the strength of the bail. So the wire that was underneath, that went around to the right and underneath, can now come around to the left and over the top, and exactly the opposite. So you're just switching from one side to the other, and you can generate as large or as small a bail as you fancy. So one goes around and under, one goes around and over. I think it looks really attractive as it is. You could even go for a very heavily woven bail up at the top here and an elongated neck design, but I'm going to show you how to create this piece as I did earlier with this glorious moonstone. So let's add another couple of beads in and we'll see how much wire we've got left to play with. Feels really lovely to be weaving with such a heavy wire. This is 1mm or 18 gauge, and it's such a beautiful, smooth, fluid experience. So all the way around and under, all the way around and over. So I think I had 5 beads in this one. Oh no, there were 6. So let's add another one in just to kind of replicate that design, but you can obviously play with the numbers to your heart's content. So what we're going to do is to take the wire that is just slightly closer to the neck of the design, and I'm just going to bring that all the way around that main segment once, just kind of tying that off. So this again can be turned into a little spiral into an upcycled design later. And I'm just going to flip over to the rear of the design and just give that a really hearty squish, and that sets the whole thing together. It now can't come undone. So if I grip across the bail just before those beads start getting woven, I'm going to make sure that that bail sits at the 12 o'clock position and that I'm happy with how that looks, and I'm going to bring that bail forwards, not even at 45 degrees, it's more like 30 degrees from the surface. Now you could use a bail making plier, but I think today when you're working with wire on wire it does pay to be a little bit softer, so I'm going to use a wooden mandrel, and I'm just going to move really slowly so that I don't damage anything. These wires have seen some action today, they've been bent around a few times. So let's just pull that other wire out to the side to make sure that it doesn't interrupt anything, and draw that down. So it's a really interesting and different bail which is textured on the back as well. So what we're going to do next is to tie everything together. Now when I make a tutorial like this, it tends to get away from me and I end up with about 15 trillion things I want to say and do. So all I would say is if you don't want to generate a bail that looks like this, you don't have to. If all you take is the beaded prong setting section from today's tutorial, then that's absolutely fine. Don't forget, I would love to see your designs. If you're making anything from the Gem Hawks YouTube channel, head over to my Facebook group, drop in a photo comment and show me what you've made from my tutorials. I'd love to see them. So this is where we've ended up, and what we're going to do is to use the heaviest wire, that's the cut end of that 16 gauge or 1.25mm. We're going to turn that on the back at a right angle so that the bail meets itself and sits really neatly. If I support across that angle change and push the wire forwards very sharply, you see that's as sharp as I can, at least with the wire that's done this amount of work, I'm just going to grip across the back there. And I'm going to push the wire around. The reason I'm doing it slowly is so that when I bring that cut end across the back, the bail stays centralised on the rear side. Now you can finish this however you want to. I quite like to add a spiral at this stage because I think it works really, really well, but you might prefer to just see the beads or the simplicity. So you could simply cut that away on the rear. I think I'm going to actually put a spiral down towards the back here, so it's already got a flush cut to it. Let's add a spiral and take it down towards the gemstone cabochon. Draw that around until it starts spiraling, and then I can either get it to sit exactly on the back, which will be slightly visible from the front, or my heart would tell me to take it down slightly, make it thinner so that it's still nice and secure. Let's just push that down against the back of that pendant design. So you can just about see a little spiral, but we do have this other wire, which was one of the wrapping wires, one of the 1mm or 18 gauge wires, and I'm going to bring that across the front now. That one is not flush cut. I'm going to trim it to about 1.5 inches. Get those memory wire finishing pliers in. Again, you could use rounder nose or bail making pliers. Draw it all the way round. give it a hearty squish, and then draw that down across the front. So you've got choices. You may not want to cover up that lovely weave that you did down here, so you don't have to have anything on the front if you don't want to, but I like to have options in case I change my mind about how something looks. So what I might do is just draw that down so that it matches the heavier wire on the back. So it's a slightly opened up spiral, and it just sits down on the neck of the design. So in the other instance with that beautiful moonstone, I pushed the wire upwards at the front, and you can see more of that 3-strand bail weaving. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed today's Feldspar fun and games. It's not exactly for the shy and retiring, is it? But that's the size of the cabochon that I chose to use today. I love Feldspar. I love moonstone. I love this rainbow infused labradorite. I quite like all of the gemstones really, but Feldspar has my heart. Thanks so much for watching. If you've enjoyed today's tutorial, please do like and subscribe to the channel. Drop me a comment down below if there's anything you'd like to see me do, and do share the video onto your chosen social media. I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye for now.